Well, it ain't great, but it's as straight as the crow flies. So all my crow's doing is flying and can't seem to find his legs. He's a broken old crow, just like me. No legs. Hope that's not an omen for my channel, but it is not for this moment. Hey guys, how you doing? Crusty old crow back. Oh, there's those legs. Back again to do the tactical perspective, this hobby of mine that was rooted so deeply in my childhood and G.I. Joe and that military change in who I was and all that stuff and all those perspectives. And guys, I've talked to you guys about a lot of things, and it's been a little uncomfortable. I've talked to you about your generosity, and I thank you for your generosity, both in your time and your gestures and the things you say. I've also been trying to grow this channel, not in necessarily a big base, but just the right kind of subscriber base. But I realized that it might be in contradiction to some of the things you've seen me do of late, like reach out to guys like Viper Island or tag guys like his chat and Articulated Ninja and others in there. And guys, that's not me trying to grow my channel by saying, hey, promote me. That's me trying to talk to subject matter experts about something I'm very passionate about and nothing more. So just please don't misinterpret that as something subversive. I'm trying to be very transparent with you. So being transparent as I am, I'm doing a different type of hot mic again. I like that title, hot mic. It seems to work for a guy that talks as much as I do. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some other interests I have now. Let's put some nice box art up here for you guys to look at in the background, and I'm going to explain what we're talking about on this one, because it is Joe related, but it's also more about what walked me away from Joe when I got older, and how I see it all tying together again and where all that goes. And I'm applying the same perspective I do to G.I. Joes, to comic books and other things these days. And I see a lot to discuss on what's going on with Marvel Comics and the Marvel universe in this era for this generation of guys. And I realize my demographic is a lot of guys my age, and I wanted to tell you guys I also collected comics in the 90s and in the 80s, and quite honestly, up until about 10 years ago, I was very much collecting comics. It's very synonymous with ADHD for people to collect things. It's a control aspect, it's an organizational aspect, it's a place to expend your attention, and a lot of us that do have ADHD have a relationship with our collections that is much more likened to a family member than a possession, right? And that's kind of, you guys have picked up, that's how I feel about my Joes, right? And as far as this channel goes, you guys know I'll make a video about whatever I want. I'm gonna have more videos than I do subscribers, and I'm fine with that, right? It is what it is. So today I kind of wanted to just go through some thoughts I was having about G.I. Joe and where I went after G.I. Joe and why exactly I went there, to see if anyone else was doing this or feeling this down there in the US. So first off, really quickly going to explain I do plan on one day tackling a subject of attention deficit disorder once I'm back on my medication and can do something about mine. It's in the description for the channel. At some point, I'm going to be talking about adults with diagnoses of ADHD and what setbacks we find in our careers when you look back on them. And I think, and as a military person, looking back on my career at ADHD, you can definitely see where it's affecting me right now, and I can see where it affected me then. That's just some blurbs about hyperactive and inattentive ADHD and how they can overlap. And then you can see I was lucky with severe ADHD. I'm right in the middle of both. I get the best of both worlds, and you guys see a lot of it in my channel. You see me trying to stay focused when I'm doing a figure review or I want to talk about something. You see me getting very worked up. You see me getting right on it, right? That's my obstacle, but I'm not going to live under it. I'll just stay on top of it and tell you guys about it, right? So I do plan on doing that. If anyone is interested in a series like that, let me know. If not, that's fine. I'll do it anyways, but it definitely won't be called a tactical perspective, I don't think. I like my title of Spinning Compass Burning Map. So guys, Marvel Comics. Let's talk about them for a sec. These were the culprit. This was the wife, the wife, what the serious girlfriend, if not wife, after Joe and us parted company for me. And I'm gonna get into why. I started thinking about this when, and I'll just move these off to the side for now. I started thinking this about when I was hunting down G.I. Joe 301, the new G.I. Joe restart done by Skybound Entertainment Comics. And if you guys aren't familiar with Skybound, some of you, it is the company that Robert Kirkland is running. I think it's his company. He's the guy that brought you The Walking Dead as a comic book and then linked up with AMC and got it to you as a show. But I remember being an avid comic collector when this issue came out. And after about 12 issues of that, I said this was going to be a game changer for the comic industry as far as this would really translate well, I said at the time, into a movie series or something like that. And then sure enough, AMC came out with the TV series just shortly after we were all talking about that. It was like it was clear, right? So, and that just came from good storytelling at the time and good premise, which G.I. Joe really did start out as, guys. And I wanted to see if they were going to bring that back in the new Skybound Entertainment. But as we remember, G.I. Joe #1 was all part of a marketing strategy with the toy line and the cartoons to sell their products. So Marvel Comics, while they were the supplier for G.I. Joe, they were also the supplier for what I walked away from Joe for. And before I get into that, I should also mention that Marvel Comics also supplied them with Action Force in the UK and all that. So all the feedback about these wonderful figures, which I am going to England and I am hunting down. If anybody knows good chain stores in England I should be looking for these in, let me know before February, before January. Anyways, Action Force, I really want to track down a couple, and I get what D-Mac was saying, like the 60th anniversary line is really just Hasbro trying to claw back some of their market they've lost to Action Force, and I get that. But remembering Marvel did support this as well, and there you have Sergeant Slaughter, the crossover capable. Like, there's a lot to get excited about in that line, guys. If you haven't seen Action Force, part of the Valorverse, I guess, or whatever, do look them up. Anyways, so back to the one that I really want to find, if it's there, if this was real. You guys know me, I'm armored Reki, but a Steeler, oh my god, yes. If I find a Steeler, you know, like I'm coming back with a big suitcase from England and an angry wife and a sore bank account. Anyways, one of the things I was thinking about with the Joe line in the modern thing, and I was thinking about how Marvel's kind of hitting us on all these different fronts with Disney Plus, and then their MCU movies, no matter how you feel about those. I mean, I'm very opinionated about them, but and then their comics and where they want to reach, because they all have Disney behind them now. And I was like, you know, Joe can benefit from a couple of examples here right now. So we all know that G.I. Joe had that movie, the Rise of Cobra and Retaliation, I believe it was, or whatever. And they were using guys like Channing Tatum and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, even Bruce Willis showed up to try and, you know, rejuvenate that little spark we all had with the line. And you got some of us older guys talking to our kids about Joe again. And that eventually led to, it was the cause of COVID. And so while COVID happened, just kidding guys, whatever. So while COVID happened, Joe revisited the toy line and did this remarkable job with Classified. They captured us, and now we're all current with that. But I was thinking about G.I. Joe 301, and I was like, that's one part of their old strategy. They did comics, and then they've got the action figures. So there's the second part of the strategy. So the third part of the strategy is really the loop. That one of the two things I'm talking about here today is, where does Joe fall in multimedia now, and where would I like to see them go? So I'm just gonna say where I would like to see them go, and therefore where I think they should. And I think we got to start looking. If they were doing it, say I'm in Hasbro and I'm pushing Hasbro, because you guys know I want to be the front man for Hasbro one day. Yeah, right. I'd be looking at Netflix or Disney Plus to relaunch this series for the new market, for the adult animation fanatic, for the youthful animation fanatic. It could walk that middle line. And I would highly recommend that it remain an animated series and that they don't dive into live action and things like this. Just because, animated series never have a shelf life the way a live action does. In that the actors never age, right? So I would recommend they use the same animators that are doing this amazing little piece of What If on Disney Plus for Marvel. In that they look a lot like traditional Disney animation, but with more modern and realistic almost feel, more tangible appeal, right? If you had a problem with the What If series for animation, I mean that this tells me that you like a completely other style, and that's fine. But this I think would be successful with a Joe series on Netflix or Disney Plus. Perhaps a season, perhaps just a limited run, perhaps even just a single movie would be good. So you got to remember when we were collecting Joe as kids, right? The TV shows would show us a lot of different action shows, and maybe you were allowed to stay up and watch that tour of duty about Vietnam. Maybe you got a glimpse of what the real world combat situation was supposed to look like. And you were like, hey, you know what? I've never seen anyone get shot in a Joe cartoon and actually die, right? And things like that start emanating as you get older because you start looking for more tangible, real examples for yourself to learn off of as you get older, right? But other shows that were popular at the time, like the Dukes of Hazzards, which glorified the outlaw aspect and being your own rebel kind of deal, and family over all else, right? And then you had the A Team, which was outcasts can make a difference, and especially those military experienced ones that were wronged by their country, which was a popular theme back in those days because of the Vietnam era and what veterans were coming back to, right? And I noticed in the A Team, still no one ever getting killed, really. Same as Dukes of Hazzard. The only thing that was ever getting killed and shot every time in the A Team was the front left tire of every vehicle ever pursuing those guys in their van. So in walks Ryan to a comic store to go get his Joe comic one day, and he sees this big picture on the wall of a big steel man, and on his belt was this logo. And I was like, the hell's that? And that day I picked up this comic, which was under that poster. It was the new release for X-Men 210. And I thought, what a motley looking crew. I like this. The guy's got claws, another guy's made of metal. You got one guy who looks like a blue demon. You got some interesting looking women in the background, and it says, go ahead and make our day or whatever. It's like very much Clint Eastwood. I sense a fight in this book. So I bought this book. And I didn't realize of all the books to buy and have that vibe about, this one was going to change everything, because there was very much a fight in this book, guys. Let me tell you about the mutant massacre beneath the streets. This was groundbreaking and earth-changing for crusty old Crow. I don't know if I ever bought a Joe comic that day. I certainly know I bought this X-Men comic. It was introduced to the beginning of the end as far as a nice tame comic series as far as I read back in the back issues for the most part. That's the one that came after it. And we all remember there was a Snake Eyes comic that had that same cover, right? It was a G.I. Joe cover, with a G.I. Joe comic done with the Marvel frame celebrating their anniversary, and it featured Snake Eyes. But this Wolverine one was also part of the crossover, as did Follow This. And this is really some of the best old school images I have in my head of Wolverine to this day. One of my favorite artists, Alan Davis, did this one, and this was the last issue in the crossover, because that's what it was. I joined right in the middle of a bloody crossover. And it was something I would learn to later despise and yet like as a collector in comics. Something Joe never really introduced me to. Joe never crossed me over into anyone else but Joe. If Joe wanted me to cross over to something, there was a toy that the toy makers were making in the Joe line that would be introduced, right? Uh, Comics didn't have those restrictions. So I went back, I bought this comic. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I went back again and I found it when I was posted to Kingston for a little while. In the op center, I needed some wall art for my house. So I found a bunch of old comics. I found this one and I picked that up and I slapped that on my wall to remind me of a happier time. But yeah, you know, like all of a sudden the X-Men were introducing us to guys like the Hellfire Club and Sea Crow and Nimrod, right? But and the Morlocks, these mutants that were even less accepted in society. Like this was the X-Men's thing. They were all mutants. They were born with these abilities that could help anyone. They could have been very helpful, but people were so afraid of them and their potentials that they feared and resented them. So mutants were like outcasts, and we get back to a very racial era and political kind of tone to this, right? And it was something that they dealt with for a number of years in the comics. The Morlocks were mutants that couldn't even pass as human, most of them, so they couldn't even try to integrate in society. They were forced down to the sewers, and thousands of them living down in the sewers, like what you see when we say the New York homeless population, and they live in subway systems and things like that. Same deal. It's what it was based off of. So I pick up 210 and I watch what's about to happen, and then what ends up happening is that we find out through later issues that it's caused by him, but a guy named Mr. Sinister basically sets designs on disrupting the status quo down there, and he sends in his marauders, right? So this kill squad of other mutants and other superpowered beings, and basically they go on a murder bloodbath through the mutant community in the lower New York subsystem, kills off all the like tons and tons of Morlocks. And it was this massive crossover event in Marvel that spanned over a number of issues that would normally have nothing to do with the X-Men, like Thor and Power Pack and Fantastic Four. But I joined this comic, and all of a sudden I am witnessing a fight where guys were dying. For one, these gloriously powerful heroes were losing the fight and getting their butt kicked, and there was a big status quo disruption. Like a lot of big players got hurt, and there was like a couple of years of a lot of suspense about what would happen to characters like Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, and Colossus as they were all injured. Angel was the big one that he wound up getting the wings so badly damaged that they had to transition that character into Archangel. But basically it was the Marauders running amok under the streets, murdering everything in their path. And even when the X-Men, Thor or others got involved, it wasn't enough to really stop them. It had to come to a head at the X-Mansion. And you had this introduction also of a new X-Men named Psylocke, and right away she's thrown into this battle with Sabretooth that ends up having to result in the Wolverine and Sabretooth battle that inspired so many more to follow, right? It was one of the best, most eye-opening experiences as a Joe fan to see this bloody tooth and nail battle, so epically drawn and epically written by Chris Claremont and Alan Davis at the time. So the Morlocks were getting massacred. Later in the series, you would find out that a fan favorite of a lot of X-Men fans, a guy named Gambit, was actually the one that went and led them to the Morlocks. Like he was younger and was put in a bad spot, got manipulated, and ended up taking those Morlocks right to the front entrance the Marauders right to the front entrance of the Morlock cavern system and letting them go do their thing, right? I don't read anymore, and I haven't read all the retcon stuff. There's probably even more to that story that I don't even know, but there's your Angel getting his wings pinned, right? And this is stuff I was taking in going, I have not seen anybody suffer in G.I. Joe. I see battles, I see conclusions and conflicts, end states and launchings and all this, but I never really see any duration of suffering. see, temporary mind control and maybe being bound up or knocked out cold, and that's it. But with Angel, the man was left pinned to a wall, crucified like Christ for a number of hours. Like, he was left there to suffer, and it took away his identity. Like, these guys ruined him. He couldn't be the Angel anymore after that. And he went on with post-traumatic stress disorder after this experience, which I would learn more about as an adult, unfortunately. And I look back on it now, it's like those writers were kind of capturing some key moments that kids don't even figure out, right? And Angel did all that to try and save people, right? So, but he later became the Archangel and a pawn of a major villain named Apocalypse. His wings were restructured, and there was a lot of retconning going on, but he became the most dark version of himself, like that tragic twist to the character that you'll sometimes see. But in the end, it was always Colossus that brought me to the table, right? There was a warning that popped up over his head. This was my first favorite character, and you thought, as a Canadian, it was Wolverine. It would be Wolverine after, but Colossus was the one that said, "Come to the XMen, tovarищ." Shadowcat was another one. I really kind of dug the young kid on the team keeping up. I didn't realize that it was a trope you would see in all other team comics, but Shadowcat was my first introduction to the spunky young kid trying to keep up with the big kids. And Nightcrawler, as you know, like Shadowcat and Nightcrawler and Colossus were all more like very injured in that. And that brought in crossovers later for the Fantastic Four, who helped try to save Shadowcat. And Psylocke would eventually become this version of Psylocke through her connection with Mojo and others and the Mandarin and all this nonsense. Like, there was crossovers abound. These stories went everywhere. It didn't just tie back to Cobra every time. Sometimes you think you get to know the X-Men universe a little bit as you grew into it, and they would pull something right out of the Spider-Man universe and throw it into yours as something. They had so much potential. There was the Psylocke originally, when she was a British character, and she would introduce us, before she turned into the ninja assassin later, to her brother Brian, which was going around in England already as Captain Britain, but she was linked to Mojo, which has been an interesting character to see in the Marvel Universe. But there's Captain Britain, right? And Power Pack, they were that little kid team. They even showed up in the Mutant Massacre, so there was that sense that anyone could see peril, right? And here are these kids now over their head, go save them. I talked about the Fantastic Four. Thor, like I said, he broke in. This all wound up going off to branch off titles like Excalibur, but one of the first ones I ever really took note of was earlier. I went back and I got back issues, but New Mutants was also a really big moment for them. They crossed over with that, but to me this was a very profound comic, and I wanted this on my wall, and I wanted this as my driving home point for why I was able to walk to Joe, to something I thought was bringing me more cerebral content, and it was the death of Cypher. The story of Cypher is actually is one of the sadder ones in the MCU of that time. Cypher was the young mutant who could actually, his only power that he brought to the table is he could speak every language, or at least learn it in a very short amount of time and then speak it. And he formed this relationship with their alien friend, Warlock, that would be later re-explored and re-envisioned and translated. But for a moment, Cypher was just Cypher, Doug Ramsey. And he was the weakest member of the New Mutants. And they went on this mission. It didn't go well, and they found themselves in trouble when an underestimated foe, and I can't remember his name, I'm not going to look at it, pulls himself a gun and starts opening fire. And at that point, it didn't matter who was in the way. None of them had the ability to stop a bullet, really, except Cannonball, who was not in the way. It came down to the bullet was going to shoot Wolfsbane, Little Rain Sinclair, the Irish werewolf girl, mutant, and Doug tackled her, got out of the way, and it cost him his life, and he passed away. And I thought, oh my God, they took the weakest character on the team and they stood on his throat in front of the readers and let him die and let you absorb that. because it was always kind of their fear for him that he wasn't going to be able to protect himself on the battlefield if the New Mutants ever got into trouble. And here was the moment where it came to fruition, right? And that impacted me a lot as I got older. I look back at that title, I thought, you know, like that must have been something that was bringing the adults into the comics at that time. Well, I was just a kid learning about them, right? And I was like, this was good writing, this was good storytelling. Joe brought me a lot of fun stories, brought me a lot of epic adventures, brought me some interesting concepts and ideas, and a colorful array and cast. But comics in general, uh, they dipped into that, and it was opening a door to the outside world and saying, leave home now, Joe. You're done with Joe, go see that outside world. So comics was a big one, and I know you guys have strong feelings about comics, some of you, so maybe I hope you found some of that content good. You guys often see that one in the background. I remember having the original, but this is a reprint, and you know, another one that speaks to me. Like, remember, and this would not go over well in Wolk era, but if you guys followed X-Men, remember the battle between her and the Juggernaut, and as sensitive and emotional as they tried to make the Juggernaut about it, it comes down to a guy beating on a chick and in a weight class way unfair, right? And I wonder if that story would get told the same way in today's comic writing for today's generation of reader. I wanted to do that because all this, guys, because you heard me shout out a lot about these boxes and their cover art, and this is what I keep saying. Like, I remember Jim Lee doing the Genosian military and thinking, God, those would make wicked Joe figures at some point if they ever managed to go, let's dip into Genosha in the X-Men U, but they won't. But I really have a respect for the guys that worked in the comic industry. I did go to college to try and learn how to write and draw in the comic industry, but real life made me go join the army halfway through. But like, that reminds me a lot of Sam Keith kind of art from the Max, but or Bill Sinkwitz, but not Bill Sinkwitz. Bill Sinkwitz expired. And then even guys that don't like manga, guys, it's an opportunity for young artists, and I'm all about that. So that's why I wanted to talk about that. If you guys were okay with that series, you go ahead and say so. Let me know any way you want, like, share, subscribe, whatever. Comment. And let me know about what you walked away from Joe to. I've collected everything, guys. I've collected Warhammer 40k, armies, comics, and hockey cards, and now I'm collecting Joe's. I'd like to think of collecting subscribers, so thanks very much for those of you who watched the video and took the time. And until the next hot mic, I think that's probably going to be it for tonight. And definitely still waiting on my Ripper, guys. And I know, Aaron, you put a Ripper review out, and I'm going to watch it, even though I don't like watching other guys' reviews on figures I plan on doing myself. But God, I just want to see it. So I'm going to go watch Aaron's review, guys, and I will talk to you guys soon. Roman, I sent you my email, buddy. You go ahead and send me an email. We'll talk about everything. And yeah, I think I read your comment just before I started shooting, and thank you, man. I really appreciate the fact that you and I are so like-minded. Yep, senior NCO is very much the same mindset. Okay, talk to you guys soon. Bye.